QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021. Comparative balance sheet creation. Let's get into it with Intuit's QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars practice file. We currently have the open windows open. You can open the open windows by going to the view dropdown, selecting the open windows list. We're now going to be creating a comparative balance sheet. We'll do that from scratch, noting that there is a comparative balance sheet for a year-over-year comparison within the default reports, which is basically put together with some of the functions that we will show here. If you know the functions to put together a comparative balance sheet, then you can apply those functions whether or not it's a year-over-year comparison or some other period comparison. You could do similar type of functionality with income statement reports, which we will do in future presentations. However, note that the income statement reports will differ from balance sheet reports in that the balance sheet is as of a point in time. Income statement are performance reports. So when you read them, they will look a little bit different when you're trying to compare, time period to time period. So if I go to the reports dropdown, company and financial, we could open the standard balance sheet in this format, or we can go to the reports dropdown, we can go to the report center, and then take a look for our balance sheet. I'm going to maximize the report center. I'm going to go into the standards on the left, and then the company and financial. I'm going to change this to a list view so we can be scrolling down. The balance sheet reports are typically under the P&L or profit and loss reports. So here we have the balance sheet reports. We want to go into the standard balance sheet. So I'm going to open up the standard balance sheet by running that report. So I'll run that report, standard balance sheet, changing the date up top. We'll start off at 12/31/21. This is where we've been starting at. I'm also going to go back to the report center and open out the comparative. There's a balance sheet previous year comparison. Let's take a look at what that one will look like, and then we'll do something similar, but we won't do a year-over-year comparison. So I'm going to say run that report, and then we have our comparison. I'm going to change the date up top to 12/31/20, and now we have our comparative report comparing one year to the prior year. Note that in 2020 we didn't have a lot of detail in there, so they're going to be a lot different because we're going to enter the data input into this data file in 2021 being the primary year we enter the data. But then it gives us the change, then it gives us the percent change. We're going to do a similar report, but instead of a year-over-year comparison, we want to do a month-to-month comparison, comparing February and January of 2021. So that's what we'll do starting. We'll start off with the standard balance sheet here, and then we'll run our adjustments with it. Now what we want to see is we want to see January and February. So let's just think about, there's a couple different ways that we can actually show January and February. And so I'm going to go back to the customized report. And one way we can do this is say, let's change the dates from 01/01/21 to 02/28/21. So I have the range of January through the end of February. Now, if I just leave it at that, then it's just going to give me one column. If I say OK, it gives me the total as of the end of February. It would be the same no matter what the beginning date is in this case, because we're talking about a balance sheet report, which is as of a point in time, and therefore the beginning date doesn't matter for just simply this report. It does matter when you drill down on the data. So if I drill down on the data, then it gives me data with a range in it, because that's a timing report. But if I close this back out, this is just as of 2/28/21. So, but if I want to then see it like where we stood at the end of January and February, we could just change the columns now to say, I don't want just the total, but I want you to show each month. And what that does is it breaks it out automatically. Notice it breaks it out by having the prior month first, January, and then February. And it gives us that nice breakout. Now, once again, this tells us where we stand as of the end of January, where we stand as of the end of February, as opposed to an income statement report, which will tell us how we did in January and February, meaning how much we earned, kind of like how far we ran kind of thing, as opposed to where we were at the end of running there, which is the balance sheet, which is where we stand at a particular point in time. Now, oftentimes you want to reverse this. You want to have the current month first, possibly, the prior month last, and that the idea of that is to have the most relevant data on your first thing you're going to read from left to right. And then we might want to have a difference between the two. What's going to be the difference between the two, like a subtraction of the two, and then we could have a percentage change. So for that, we're going to do a different method. So we're going to do the same comparison, but we're going to do it a different way. I'm going to go to Customize Reports. And this time, this one's a little bit funny to get used to, but let's try it out. We're going to say, I'm going to change it just for the month of February by saying 02/01/21. So February 1st through February 28th, that's going to be the full month of February. I'm going to put the months back down. Actually, let's keep it at the months here. And then let's check this item down to say the previous period. So I want to pick up the previous period. So, and that means that I currently have the current month, and I have it labeled as a month, so it knows it's a month, not just 28 days. Because if it's 28 days, then it might compare it to the previous 28 days, and I don't want it to do that. I want to compare it to the previous month, which has 31 days in it. So I'm going to say, okay. And then now it has February 1st and then January. So it's same kind of thing, except now it put the current month first, which is often what you do when you do like a 2-period comparison. Now again, note if I change this item, the drop down from month to the total, which is kind of the default, then you might, it looks like it worked out here, but you might end up with a situation where it tries to measure the days, and that's what you want to be careful of. If it starts to say, hey, look, this is 28 days compared to 28 days instead of January compared to February, then you want to just basically change this to the month. So toggle back and forth with those options if you run into a problem with that. Then I'm going to go to the customized report. Now the next thing I might want is a change. What's the difference between the two? How, where did we stand? Where do we stand now compared to where we stood last month? So I'm going to go, okay, customized reports. Let's take a look at the dollar change, the dollar difference, the subtraction of the 2 periods. So there we have that. Now we've got the cash. This is the cash. Current period minus the prior period. That's the difference between the two. So that's nice. And then we could have the percent change. We might want the percentage change. So I'm going to go, okay, customized reports, percent change, and okay. Now the percent change is something that's often a little bit more confusing for people to conceptualize, but it's useful. It's really kind of useful to do comparisons. And anytime you do some kind of comparison with any kind of, like if you're measuring 2 different things, any time of job performance and whatnot, you have to end up using percentages. And that's why job performance of athletes and whatnot, we always have to use percentages like batting averages and whatnot because they had different at-bats and whatnot. So you got to use the percentage change, and the percentage change will be calculated as, we're going to take the difference between the two. So in this case, we got the current month here. Let's do cash again because cash is always. So current month 108504.88 minus the 100003.5. That gives us our dollar change. Then you take the change and you divide it by the previous month, which in this case is in column 2, that being January, which is the 100003.5. And that gives it the percentage change if you move the decimal 2 places over, that being 8.5% about. So it's an 8.5% increase that we had here. Now, the reason this is nice is because if you were to compare this to some other company, for example, and the company was larger than yours, larger than us, but they also sell guitars or whatnot, they do the same thing we do, then we can't really compare our dollar change. It would make no sense. It would be like comparing a local burger shop to McDonald's chain or something like that. The McDonald's would make way more money, presumably, and we couldn't make that comparison, but we still want to copy them. We still want to benchmark to them to some degree to see how we're doing with relation to them. We can do the percentage change, just like we could if we compared 2 people that had batting. One had way more at-bats than the other person, way more chances to hit the ball than the other person. We have to take an average on how many times they hit the ball out of how many chances they had in order to figure, something that is a comparable percentage. So any kind of job performance, we typically have to do some type of percentage. So that's going to be our standard breakout. Notice that's very similar to what we had here in the default settings for the report that was pre-generated, the balance sheet previous year comparison. If I go to the customized reports up top, let's see then it took the previous year instead of the previous period because it's comparing an entire year and did the same thing, the percent, the dollar change, and then the percentage change. Closing this back out, going to go back to our balance sheet here. Now, as we print this, we might want to do some more customizations to this type of report. For example, you might want to change the name. We should change the name now because it's not simply the balance sheet, it's a comparative balance sheet. And then we have the as of periods here, which isn't really applicable because it's not as of February anymore. We have both January and February. We might want to just remove that altogether. So I could say, let's customize the report, go to header and footer and say, it's not just a balance sheet now, it's a comparative balance sheet, Hopefully I spelled that right. If I didn't, I apologize. Sometimes I don't, oftentimes. But I think anyway. So then we can remove this item, subtitle. So remove that and say OK. So now we don't have that subtitle and the dates are basically indicated down here. So maybe that's would be the way to go. Then we'll do some standard formatting. Oftentimes I'll take away these items. I don't really need someone to know when, the date or the time that I printed the report. They need to know the date of the report, right? So I'm going to say customize the reports and go to header and footer. I typically will remove the date prepared, time prepared, report basis. You might want to put like in the extra footer, put your name or the company name there. My name, company name, and the extra footer down below and say OK. So I'll do that in some of the standard type of formatting. And the standard formatting also, I might remove the penny, the cents, because it really, with a report that has 4 columns in it, the pennies can take up a good deal of space. They can muddy up the look of the report, and they're probably not adding anything in terms of decision-making value to the report. So let's go ahead and go to Customize Reports. I'll go to the fonts and numbers. I'll typically remove the pennies, so that now the pennies are going to go on. That kind of cleans it up a bit, looks a bit cleaner. So then I often might want to put the negative numbers like this in brackets and make them red. I'll do that oftentimes. So I'm going to go to Customize Reports, Fonts and Numbers. We're going to say let's make the negative numbers bracketed and red. And so there we go. So now we have bracketed and red negative numbers. So that's going to be one way you could do that comparative report. You can do it obviously comparing month to month, quarter to quarter. You can, standard comparisons would be like maybe day to day, week to week. But obviously the quarter to quarter comparison, year to year comparison, and month to month comparison will probably be more the types of comparisons that you might run. As you think about running these types of reports, you want to start thinking about, obviously, if you were providing this to a customer, how many reports do you want to be batching together? You need a balance sheet, you need an income statement, then possibly a comparative reports, balance sheet and income statements. You could start to think about what kind of grouping of reports you can have. And as you start thinking about comparisons, you can see there could be a whole lot of reports that you can start to generate. Once you have your comparative balance sheet, if this is something that you think is going to be common from time period to time period, that you would like to run this possibly for a future time period and want to change only the date and not all the formatting, then you can go ahead and memorize the report. We'll talk about how to set up and customize your memorized reports in future presentations.